The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome to the Canola School. I am Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now is Mr. Jay Whetter. He's editor of Canola Digest. Welcome here, Jay.
Hey, Lyndsey. Great to be here. With that 2-second pause there at the beginning, I thought, am I supposed to be talking now?
You can. I mean, if you really want to, you can be like, hey, welcome here. No. Okay, so this Canola School episode, I want to dig in to some of the big stories from the year, perhaps on the agronomy side, but also last week was Canola Week, big event as well. And so I wanted to capture some of what happened last week as well. So maybe let's start there. Some of the take-home messages from Canola Week.
Okay, so let's get right to it. So the first thing I want to talk about is Charles Geddes. He talked about the herbicide-resistant weed situation on the prairies. And this topic comes up a lot. And I mean, Lyndsey, you've been talking about this your whole career, so have I. And farmers are probably tired of hearing about it, except that dang glyphosate-resistant kochia has changed the conversation somewhat. So Charles just gave a few pointers, and it was actually, so Canada has 86 known resistant weed biotypes. So a biotype, like for example, group 1 resistant wild oat and group 2 resistant wild oat are two biotypes.
Okay.
But you can have a number of biotypes with the same weed. So it doesn't mean we have 86 different weeds. But anyway. Canada ranks third.
That's important.
Canada ranks third after Australia and the U.S. U.S. first, Australia second, Canada third.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said it costs hundreds of millions of dollars a year, these weeds, in lost yield or extra management costs. Mm-hmm. So it's becoming a much bigger issue for farmers. So what do farmers do about it? And so he had an interesting graphic, and I'm just going to touch on this, and I'll move on. But he had this huge circle, and so this is herbicides. And then little tiny circles at the bottom. This is the cultural control methods that farmers use. And these are I don't know what the other one was mechanical, So cultural would be more narrower rows, more plants, so you get better competition. It's ways to get the plant starting off the season or the crop starting off the season faster so that you get right into that more competitive state faster. Mechanical is like the harvest weed seed destroyers that you would put on the back of a combine. Invented in Australia because, as you know, Australia ranks pretty highly with these herbicide-resistant weeds. So that's a tool that costs about $100,000, but is quite effective for any weeds that are coming through the combine, and that's key. It'll crush basically all of those. So it's a good tool, and if you think about how much you spend on herbicides over a 5-year or 10-year span, this is maybe a good investment if you have a lot of issues.
Quickly before we move past this, though, because I think it is key that I do think that the advent of kochia, glyphosate-resistant kochia, and as you mentioned, potentially within a weed having several different resistance biotypes.
Yeah,
I really do think this is one that for many farmers may be the driver to significantly try some of those or institute some of those cultural practices.
You look at the amount of kochia out there, and it's scary in some fields, and there are biotypes with groups 2, 4, and 9, like triple stacks out there now.
Yeah.
So the 2 has been around a long time. 4 is new, and 9 is new, but they are out there.
Overall, herbicide-resistant weeds.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to insects.
Oh, good. I like insects.
Megan Benkoski, she's a research scientist with Ag Canada in Saskatoon, and she's an insect specialist. And she did a presentation on kind of the year in review. But the one thing I remembered, and I took a little picture of it and I tweeted it out, was this pile of grasshoppers. And one of her assistants or technicians or whatever sweep netted around Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and 25 sweeps. And had within there, she said there was 1,788 grasshoppers.
In
something
25
like that.
Sweeps?
Yeah. And so it was you could feed a family of birds for a year on that.
Oh, that's so gross. Was there
But
any
anyway,
crop to be sweeping at that
yeah,
point?
well, yeah, scary, eh?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that sweep netting is not how you actually scout for grasshoppers. They're
Right.
pretty hard to scout for. Like, I think John Kowalski told me you kind of walk through the ditch and you count how
Yeah.
many are flying up in your
Yeah.
face. Well,
Yeah.
that's, I mean, that's not
It's
what he's saying. I
that's
mean,
just as
that's just,
scientific as we can get
yeah,
on grasshoppers.
yeah,
No, it
count
is
them
true
all
though.
flying.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah,
Exactly. It isn't how, but like it was a
yeah,
huge problem in Saskatchewan
yeah.
this
Well,
year
then,
and
so
parts of Alberta.
here's the point. She thinks it could be worse in 2024.
Well, and it seems like we're in for a continued dry bias, which does favor grasshoppers.
Yeah.
And so that begs the question though, because we don't have seed treatments for
Oh,
grasshoppers.
right. Yeah. So how do you manage it? It's
Right? So
just,
how do you
yeah,
manage it?
yeah,
Like you really have to be scouting early
yeah,
and often because
yeah,
there are effective insecticides, but
yeah,
you really do have to get out there well
yeah.
ahead of the problem. Okay, so grasshoppers, be on alert.
Okay. Flea
Just
beetles?
flea beetle.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
so were you surprised
Yeah.
that flea beetles were not the giant issue in 23 that we all thought they were going to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's all because Canola Watch told farmers to plant later. No,
Great
I don't know.
job, Jay.
A number of factors. I just remember John Bergen on Twitter saying, "So what? Like everybody's going to be planting all their canola in June, I guess." And I said,
Right.
"No, it's just the farmers who are on Twitter."
Just the ones that are like in the know
Yeah.
and are following Jay Whetter.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it wasn't. Now cutworms were an issue, but
Yeah.
flea beetles are always an issue. So what's the story for 2024?
Well, I would say be ready. And some of the newer seed treatments are quite effective. But uh, so at Canola Week, we had a number of presenters talk about flea beetles. And one of them was Alejandro Costamagna, who's a University of Manitoba researcher. And he just finished a project on flea beetles management. And he actually said the seed treatment is better than foliar. He did a number of
Right.
trials to
Yep.
compare. And you think, oh, seed treatment's not working. Well, yeah, it is actually working, even though sometimes it feels like it isn't because
Exactly.
you have to spray 3 times to save the crop. But no, for sure, start with seed treatment. And then he talked about the value of enough plants.
Yeah.
So, but an interesting thing he said, which kind of makes sense, but more plants actually attracts more flea beetles. So that's
You're like,
yeah,
I don't think I want that. Yeah.
right.
That's
So,
yeah.
but flea beetles smell the canola,
Right.
and
Yeah.
maybe if there's more plants, there's more smell, and they take more food. So they come in, but the trade-off with more plants is less damage per plant.
Yeah.
So you're I mean, I'm not saying there's no risk of spraying because in
Yeah.
some cases with lots of plants, you still have to spray, but it does reduce that risk. So target your 5 to 8 plants per square foot, like the Canola Council would like you to do.
Mhm.
And that, so Alejandro compared 3 plants per square foot, 6 per square foot, and 12 per square foot. Well, I mean, no one's going to aim for 12. It just doesn't make economic sense.
Mhm.
But that 6 to 8, like that 6 target is a good method for managing flea beetles.
Well, but if you're in an area with very high levels, like the 6 to 8 is what you want to end up with, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you
You
start
need
with
more seeds.
you
Yeah.
need more seeds to actually end up at that 6 to 8.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so although you're putting out perhaps more food, it's
Yeah.
diluting the negative impact per plant, which
Yeah.
all they need
Right.
to do is grow out of it. We just need to get them
Yeah.
past that stage, right?
Yeah.
So if the
Yeah.
weather cooperates, we just need to get them
Right.
past that. Okay, so that is now, I mean, seed's expensive. So as you said, we're not obviously going to be targeting 12 plants, but
Yeah.
tip to the more plants per square foot versus
Yeah.
fewer.
Yeah.
Just
The
to
5 to 8
remember
recommended range. And if you're in a heavy flea beetle area, maybe
that. 8.
spend a little bit more to
Yeah.
get closer to that 8. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Okay. Can I talk
Yeah.
about 2 other things about flea
Of
beetles?
course you can.
He
You can
gave
talk
me a
about as many as
strict
you want.
timeline, so I got to keep things going here.
Yeah, exactly. Keep moving.
Okay, these are kind of interesting. They came out of Europe. So as you know, Europe banned neonicotinoid seed
Yes.
treatments for flea beetles, and so this fellow from Germany spoke, Martin Fraun, and he was saying that not only did they lose the flea beetle seed treatment, but the neonicotinoids also worked on aphids. And aphids carry this turnip yellows virus. TUIV is what they call it.
Okay.
And now they're finding that their oilseed rape, which they call it over there, which is basically canola, but they just don't like the Canadianness of canola.
Right. Get over it.
Little political statement there.
Just okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
But anyway, so now they're finding that they're getting this virus because the neonics aren't controlling the aphids. Yeah. But I mean, credit to European canola breeders is that they now have some cultivars with resistance to this virus. So the other thing is Alan Hampton, who's a director with Alberta Canola, and Alan asked if they had measured the change in pollinator populations in the UK before and after, because the point of this ban was because they're worried it was damaging the bee population, or the pollinator population in general.
Yep.
And she said that no, we actually haven't measured the before and after, so I can't answer that for you. But then she said, my hunch is that they're still declining. So maybe it wasn't the neonics, or the neonics weren't the only factor. But anyway, but there's no, that was a hunch. There's no science either way.
So it surprised, why wouldn't they be measuring that though?
Yeah.
We'll just leave that there. We'll just, yeah, exactly.
I don't know whether we have a good count of pollinators either. I mean, maybe it's just not, maybe they're I mean, so focused on pests. You know, you can think that the dollars would be going toward pest monitoring, which kind of makes sense. And the beneficial monitoring is kind of side of desk. If we have a little extra money, maybe do that.
Well, and I think in Canada anyway, we sort of use the honeybee population as a proxy, but that's not entirely fair in that they are a farmed livestock, if we want to call them that, because beekeepers call them livestock. They're farmed, so that's not, and they're not native to Canada. Honeybees are, right? So we have native pollinators, we have other pollinators, but the honeybee as proxy to our pollinators doesn't work either. So, but we tend to use that, which is perhaps, I think we're going to solve a lot of these problems today. By pointing out where maybe, hey, if somebody wants to do some work on this, there you go. Okay, so that's project number 2. So we have a kosher movie, and now we have someone's PhD who can be tracking pollinators and figure out, do we have proxy pollinators that we could use?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to talk diseases?
No.
Okay, why not? It was not interesting to you? Do you just in general not like?
I don't have diseases on my notes. You can't ask me the question.
Then what else is on your list?
Okay. An interesting guy, Jerry Hatfield from Iowa State University, talked about soil health and its connection with the food quality of plants. But he was saying that, you know, if you have a healthier soil, produces a healthier crop, and that those grains have more nutrients per calorie. So you're not just getting a bunch of starch, say, from wheat, but you're actually getting a whole bunch of extra nutrients because you've grown the crop in healthy soil.
And I've heard that same older, like many years before that, sort of that discussion on seed production, on why like a seed producer wants to make sure they're growing the most robust, well-fed plant so that the seed has like maximum germ and is like a healthy seed, is that that's what you get when you feed the soil.
Yeah, we know that increasing organic matter, increasing soil carbon, it's not easy to do.
No, it's possible.
And it's possible. Yeah. So how do we? I mean, this is the thing that I'm going to ask this Jerry Hatfield from Iowa State University, is that how do I turn this into practical economic recommendations for farmers on the Canadian prairies? And I think that's a worthy objective, I think, in these conversations, because we can talk about soil health, we can talk about herbicide resistant weed management, but we need to give good, solid economic recommendations and say, okay, do this, and then this is how you'll be more profitable in the long term. It may be short-term pain for long-term gain in some of these cases, but they're good objectives as long as, I mean, for me, like part of my job is to make these recommendations as clear as possible and
Yep.
as give it an economic evidence to support them.
Mm-hmm. All right. We'll leave it there. You're welcome for this outline of the article you're going to write. But thank you for sharing all this here on the Canola School. I appreciate it, Jay.
Thanks, Lyndsey. It's great.